Singapore has long worked hard to create an egalitarian, multiracial society. Made up mostly of Chinese, Tamils, and Malays, the island nation has enjoyed almost 4 decades of ethnic harmony. Recently, though, Singapore's ethnic minorities seem to have had only one topic on their minds: discrimination. Concerns are growing that minority Malays, who form 14% of the population, are not being treated equally. And as fears about Islamic extremism in Southeast Asia increase, some feel the community is more misunderstood than ever. Susan Yu explains.
Since independence, Singapore has walked a tightrope, delicately balancing its multi-ethnic population into an efficient and harmonious society. It's a feat that, up to now, the island nation has achieved with success.
I think that it is conscious policies on the part of the government which have helped maintain that level of harmony that you see.
But some perceived discrimination is beginning to upset that balance. One of them is Melissa Gunadesa. She thinks ethnic groups are being marginalized. Melissa claims she had to resort to using the Chinese surname Ji on her resume just to secure an appointment for a job interview.
I knew that it would be a problem if I was going to say my race, and I so wanted the job, so I actually shortened my surname to Melissa G. And they called me up based on that. There was no picture in the resume at all, but the moment I walked in, it was obviously not what they wanted.
Melissa says that happened 5 times before she gave up and decided to switch back to her family name.
Is this frustrating for you, knowing that the government has said that there's no discrimination at the workplace?
Yeah, because they think that it doesn't exist, and I think they know that it exists.
But racism is no longer the only issue confronting people like Melissa. In 2002, authorities arrested 32 suspected terrorists linked with Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda network. All the suspects were Jamaah Islamiyah members, and all were Singaporean Muslims. The arrest caught the government and Singaporeans off guard, and some believe the emergence of Islamic militancy in the region has made the situation worse for minorities, and specifically has heightened suspicions about those in the Muslim community.
They were more concerned about whether Muslims here would be more inclined after September 11th. The JI arrests last year, and since the bombings in Bali to support extremist acts or even terrorist acts, I think there has been more concern about these things among non-Muslims, although these are a minority.
The issue has led one lawmaker to break a political taboo. In January, Kyme advised that Singapore needed a form of affirmative action for its Muslim community to counter any appeal of militant Islam. The proposal to give the Muslim minority a boost followed a government report predicting that terrorism would get worse in Southeast Asia. Officials have been worried that disenchanted Singaporean Muslims might be tempted to join the ranks of terrorist groups such as Jamaah Islamiyah.
The status of the Muslim minority in Singapore remains a sensitive subject. As testimony, despite public debates about the Singaporean Muslim community early this year in Parliament, not one MP nor the Muslim Affairs Minister was willing to talk to us. We had hoped to find out how any affirmative action program would be carried out, especially since it would go against Singapore's long-standing principle of meritocracy. After repeated requests for interviews with Kyme, the MP who suggested the move in Parliament, and Yaakob Ibrahim, the minister in charge of Muslim affairs in Singapore, we were told neither was interested in talking to us.
I'm not sure what they're afraid of. The word affirmative action has come out and has been mentioned, but people don't seem to want to talk about it. So I don't understand where the fear and the sensitivity is coming from, because I think we can talk about it, and in fact we should.
But sociologist Syed Farid Alatas believes it's misunderstandings rather than racism that have led to barriers for Singaporean Muslims.
The Malay stalls tend to close up earlier. They tend to operate for fewer hours. Now, it is very easy to read off from this phenomenon that the Malays are lazier and less hardworking than the Chinese stall operators who tend to work longer hours. Their priority is to make sufficient amount of money to make ends meet, and spend the rest of the time socializing, in visiting their parents, in tending to their children, and so on and so forth. Now, if this means that they are not part of the mainstream because they are not caught up in the same rat race, I think yes, we can say that they are marginal in that sense, but it's because they have different priorities.
Muslim Rosmina Parsons' priority these days is to break down those stereotypes. She worries it will be baggage her children will carry into the future. She's the force behind the newly formed Muslim Mom Club on the internet.
If you don't educate these people, they don't understand what are the basic about Islam. If you're a Muslim woman, let's say if you're wearing a scarf, that means you're too religious. If you're not wearing a scarf, the society will say you're less Muslim.
Meeting religious expectations in a secular society is one of many dilemmas Muslims face in Singapore. Zulfikli bin Ali is the father of 6 children. He pulled his 2 teenage daughters out of their public school after they were banned from wearing their headscarves or tudung. Zulfikli has taken the unprecedented step of legally challenging the government's no headscarf rule.
It feels like as though you are like an adopted family of the society. It feels sad that you're being discriminated against. We pay taxes like anybody else.
Some believe Zulfikli has a strong case. That is, if it ever makes it to court.
I think it's an infringement of the constitutional rights, I think, of the Muslim schoolgirls in Singapore itself. There was also this discrimination consideration which had to be taken into account. For example, Sikh schoolboys are allowed to put on a turban.
And Singh believes it's exactly this kind of issue that extremists could take advantage of. But it seems in Singapore, maintaining uniformity in its public schools is paramount.
What we would like to see practiced in our schools is the continued provision of that common space for our students to mingle freely without developing stereotypes any further than is already available or that exists in the community or even in school.
But for Zulfikli, it's all about human rights for all Singaporeans, regardless of their race or religion.
I've been willing to come out and say stuff that most people will not.
Why is that?
You know, I think in Singapore, it's just that if you live in this society, Singapore society, I think you get wise. You know, if you tend to say too much, you know, you find that yourself or your family being worse off. So, but I think if I just, start to articulate things and say that this is unfair, and just to focus on things that's being done to us, I think I'm okay.